Penguin Random House Audio presents The Sadness of Beautiful Things. Stories by Simon Van Booy. Read for you by the author and a full cast. For SDS, 1968 to 2017. Preface. Most of the tales in this collection are based on true stories told to me over the course of my travels. Simon. Epigraph. Eternity by William Blake. He who binds to himself a joy does the winged life destroy, but he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise.
A sacrifice. Until the fire, nobody much cared for the McCrutchens. They just weren't used to living in a town. The children were rowdy and unkempt, and walked 5 abreast along the pavement, laughing at the old and shouting silly things at other people's children. Mr. and Mrs. McCrutchen had been married since they were teenagers. The service took place in a stone church. Maggie was a young bride, even by country standards. Standing barefoot in white, she concentrated on what the priest was saying, without truly understanding. The groom's mother gave her a piece of silver jewelry, and she wore it around her neck. The groom arrived with his friends. He wore a gold hoop in one ear. The sleeves of a dark suit fell over his knuckles. They rode away on a chestnut horse. To be a McCrutchen child meant knowing every detail of the story. "It's just a matter of time," their mother would sometimes say when she put them to bed, "before the lot of you start falling in love, one by one, like bottles knocked off a wall." They moved to the village of Douglas because the school was known for being good. Mr. and Mrs. McCrutchen dreamed their children might get on in life, but then their house burned down. Some said it was a cigarette or an unattended toaster. Others believed it was a candle blown into net curtains by wind. There had not been a fire like this in Douglas for 30 years. The street had to be blocked off with orange cones. The neighbours were told to move their cars and stay far back. The McCrutchens bunched together on the glistening tarmac in their nightclothes. Firemen rushed about with hoses and ladders, trying to save the other houses. Maggie McCrutchen was crying in front of everybody. The money her husband had given her to get insurance a year before, she had paid to the dentist. Her daughter had crooked teeth, and people at school were laughing. The children stayed with different neighbours, as no one had room for all 7. The next morning, their blackened, dripping things were carried into the street. The guards put up fences to keep people out. The youngest had left her doll in the panic to escape, so one of the fire inspectors came back after his shift to look for it, but had a new one in his pocket just in case. Then a month after the fire, very early, a fleet of workmen's trucks drove slowly up the street, then parked outside the charred ruin. The fences came down, and there were workers from Cork and engineers from Dublin, tramping about in their boots with charts and cameras and special equipment that was yellow and orange. The McCrutchens were living in a bungalow owned by the church, near the quarry, a place empty for years and riddled with damp, but it cost nothing more than regular appearance at Mass. When the McCrutchen children heard at school about the workmen and the ladders going up, they thought it was a joke. Eventually, a woman from the building department showed up at the bungalow. Signatures were needed so work could proceed. At first, everyone thought the church had called in a favour from Rome, the Pope himself. But one of the workmen on his tea break said it was a neighbour who'd arranged everything through Dublin lawyers, as they wished to remain anonymous. All the McCrutchens had to do was pick the tiles, choose the paint, and find carpet with a pattern they liked. Dogs who'd barely left the hearth in years were now being dragged around the block several times a day. The hunger for gossip was insatiable. A few neighbours pretended they knew who it was, but had been sworn to secrecy. Husbands coming home late from the pub on Friday night woke their wives to confess secret hoards of euros. Eventually, someone on the street did find out. A woman called Penny Kerr, known for her chrysanthemums. This is how it happened. About 12 months after the fire, the McCrutchens moved into their rebuilt home. They had a party and invited the neighbours, the guards, the fire crew, the priest, and even some of the workers. Everyone had to take their shoes off, and the youngest McCrutchen children were charged with arranging them in size order by the front door. There was a rumour the identity of the benefactor would be revealed at the party, and so the whole street packed the McCrutchen house, with drinking, eating, singing, dogs, and children running over the new carpet in their bare feet. The only person not in attendance was Kitty O'Donnell, who lived at number 77. She had gotten fairly ill, and most of the time was propped up in bed with the television on and something hot to drink. Kitty was a local woman who'd grown up in the city of Cork nearby, then moved to Douglas with her husband when they got married. After he died, she was alone. The day after the McCrutchens' housewarming, Penny took some cake to her elderly neighbour. They had a nice talk, mostly things on the news and the weather. The old woman kept patting Penny's hand. "Do you not have many visitors, Mrs. O'Donnell?" "Not so much. It's just me left now." With her husband at work in the day, and their one daughter at college in Dublin, Penny decided to go over again a few days later. She called first on the telephone. Kitty said to use a key under the flower pot. The front room was full of still grey light that seeped through delicate curtains of lace, now yellow with age. Mrs. O'Donnell said they had been from the time of her wedding. There were photographs of her husband in pretty frames, looking as Kitty remembered him from their long and happy life together. And it had been a good life. Better than most. Kitty knew that and was grateful for it. The visits from her neighbour became regular. One day Kitty sat up too quickly and knocked over her tea. The mug didn't break, but the carpet was wet. Penny got down and soaked as much as she could into a hand towel. "It was me, you know," Mrs. O'Donnell said as her neighbour pushed on the stain. "What paid for the McCrutchens' house?" Penny laughed. "You, Kitty?" "Aye. I never would have guessed it was you." "Well, now you know." "You're the secret millionaire on the street." "That's right." Penny looked up, wondering if the old woman's mind was starting to falter. "Where do you keep it then? Under the mattress?" "Down in the town, locked up in a bank for safekeeping." When Penny thought the stain was faint enough, she stopped rubbing and put the towel on the tray to go downstairs. "I'm not joking, Penny. Do you promise to keep it under your hat?" "Well, if you're the secret millionaire, Kitty, at least tell me how you came to have such a fortune. Lottery, was it?" "You really want to know?" "Aye." "Because it's a long story, and a sad one, so." "I'm all ears, Kitty." "Maybe on your next visit." Penny laughed with some awkwardness. "If you want, I can make some lunch, and you can tell me after we've eaten." Mrs. O'Donnell couldn't resist. "You afraid I'll die before you come round again?" Her neighbour's cheeks burned. "I'll be 92 in the spring, Penny." "I know. That's a grand age, so it is." After opening a can of soup, then pouring it into a silver pot to heat, Penny looked around at all Kitty's things, searching for some clue to her wealth. But the interior of number 77 was like every other home on the street. A sturdy kitchen table, bills stacked behind a small battery-operated clock, a bread bin full of little hard crumbs, a cold fireplace in the sitting room, and a cabinet of ceramic figures painted in old clothes that were supposed to have value. After eating the soup and brewing another pot of tea, Mrs. O'Donnell said she was ready. The story began in 1901. A little girl had just been born on a farm outside Douglas. Her name was Celia Riley. She had a nice time growing up, wandering the fields, walking her father to the pub, fetching water in buckets, the smell of green grass in summer, hay in winter. She was 15 years old when she met someone, a boy, just a little older than herself, from a village in the north of Ireland. He was down helping in the fields, earning money in the warm weather. After glancing at each other a few times, Celia and the young man took walks. They weren't supposed to be alone, but could always find a quiet path outside the village.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?